The smell of roasted garlic and butter filled the air inside La Belle Table, a small but stylish restaurant downtown. It was Friday evening, the kind of night when couples filled the place, laughter and clinking glasses blending into soft jazz, playing from hidden speakers. At a corner table near the window, George and Evelyn Carter, an elderly couple in their late 60s, sat across from each other. Their clothes were simple. George wore a clean plaid shirt and worn jacket, Evelyn a modest floral dress. They held hands over the table, smiling in that quiet way couples do after decades together. "This place is lovely, George," Evelyn said softly. "A bit fancier than our usual spot." He smiled. "Well, 50 years deserves something nicer than burgers and fries, don't you think?" Across the room, Ryan, their waiter, a tall, confident man in his 20s, approached with a notepad tucked into his apron. His eyes flicked over their table quickly, scanning the modest clothes, the old purse on Evelyn's lap, the lack of jewelry. He'd been working there long enough to recognize who tipped well and who didn't. "Good evening," he said, smiling mechanically. "Would you like to start with water or sparkling?" "Just water, please," George said. Ryan nodded, making a note he didn't really need to. "Any appetizers?" Evelyn glanced at the menu. "The soup sounds lovely." He smiled tightly. "That's our least expensive starter," he said before he could stop himself. Evelyn's smile faltered. George looked up, frowning slightly. "We'll have 2 soups, thank you." Ryan scribbled something down, forcing another smile. "Of course. And for the main course?" They ordered simple meals. Pasta for her, grilled chicken for him. Ryan nodded again, though his tone had cooled. "Very good. I'll get that started for you." As he walked away, he muttered under his breath, "Why come here if you can't afford it?" At a nearby table, a young couple in suits laughed loudly, ordering champagne and steak. Ryan's posture straightened immediately when he approached them. His charm returned, his smile effortless. Meanwhile, George reached into his jacket and quietly checked the small envelope inside. Carefully saved coins and bills. It wasn't much, but enough for one special dinner. Evelyn caught his glance and squeezed his hand. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Don't you worry about a thing." George smiled faintly. "As long as we're together." At that moment, Ryan passed by again, holding 2 glasses of water. He set them down with a little too much force, one glass sloshing over the edge. "Sorry," he said flatly. Evelyn dabbed the spill with her napkin, still smiling politely. "That's quite all right, dear." Ryan didn't respond. He turned away, rolling his eyes before disappearing into the kitchen. The couple shared a quiet look. Neither said anything, but both knew what the look meant. They'd seen this kind of treatment before. Still, Evelyn reached across the table again and said, "Let's not let one rude waiter ruin our evening." George nodded, his eyes softening. "No, sweetheart, we'll let the food and the memory do the talking." By the time the check arrived, the restaurant had filled with laughter and conversation. The lights dimmed just enough to give the room that golden evening glow that made everything look a little more elegant, except the expression on Ryan's face. He set the bill down in front of George with a forced smile. "Here you go, sir. Whenever you're ready." George smiled back kindly. Thank you, son." Ryan didn't reply. He turned to check on another table, a group of business people ordering wine by the bottle. He lingered with them longer than necessary, laughing too loudly, making sure everyone could see how at ease he was with the real customers. At the corner table, Evelyn reached into her purse and began pulling out small rolls of coins, quarters, dimes, even nickels, neatly wrapped in paper. George added a few folded bills, straightened carefully and worn from use. They spoke quietly, counting together, making sure it was all correct. When Ryan returned, his smile tightened again. "All set?" "Yes," George said, handing him the small envelope with care. "There should be enough for the meal and a little extra for you." Ryan opened it casually and then stopped. Coins spilled slightly into his hand. The faint metallic clink echoed in the quiet space between tables. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, you're paying in change?" Evelyn, who had been sipping her water, lowered her eyes. "It's the same amount," she said softly. "We counted everything carefully." Ryan chuckled, trying and failing to hide it. "No, no, it's fine. It's just, we usually get cards here." He turned toward the other servers near the counter, raising the envelope a little. "Hey, Mark, you got room in your till for like 50 pounds of quarters?" A couple of waiters laughed quietly. Evelyn's shoulders tensed. George looked up, calm but firm. Young man, is there a problem with us paying cash? Ryan shrugged, still smirking. No, sir, it's just not something we see much. Takes a while to count, you know? He said it loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. Two guests glanced over. One woman whispered to her date, shaking her head. Evelyn's cheeks flushed. We didn't mean to make trouble. This is just what we had. Ryan sighed dramatically. Sure. I'll, go weigh your payment then. He chuckled at his own joke as he walked off. George's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed even. He doesn't realize how foolish he sounds. Evelyn gave a small, sad smile. No, dear. He just doesn't realize how lucky he is not to know better. Across the room, Ryan dumped the coins onto the counter beside the register, the sound ringing sharp and metallic. Can you believe this? He said to the hostess. A fine dining restaurant, and they're paying like it's a laundromat. The hostess frowned. Ryan, that's enough. He smirked, not realizing the shadow that had just appeared in the doorway behind him. An older man in a dark overcoat, his gaze fixed sharply on the scene. The hostess's eyes widened. Mr. Bennett. Ryan turned, still laughing, and froze. The man he'd just mocked was standing right there, his hand resting gently on his wife's shoulder. Evening, George Bennett, the owner of the restaurant, said calmly. Mind if we have a word about the way you treat your guests? The restaurant fell silent as soon as the name Mr. Bennett left the hostess's lips. Even the soft jazz in the background seemed to fade into the tense air. Ryan blinked in confusion, the half-smile still stuck on his face. I'm sorry. What did you just... The hostess straightened her posture immediately. Mr. Harold Bennett, the owner of La Belle Table. The older man stepped forward, calm but commanding. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone drew every eye in the room. Ryan's confidence drained instantly. Sir, I didn't realize... That much is clear, Harold interrupted, his tone measured. I've been dining here for years. I like to come unannounced once in a while, to see how my staff treats the people who don't look like they're made of gold. He turned to his wife, Evelyn, whose expression was gentle, not angry. Seems we got our answer, dear. She nodded softly. We sure did. Harold faced Ryan again. Tell me something, son. Did their clothes offend you? Or was it the way they counted their money that made you forget your manners? Ryan swallowed hard. No, sir, I just thought maybe they didn't belong here? Harold finished for him. The color drained from Ryan's face. Guests nearby stopped eating, pretending not to stare. The other servers froze behind the counter. Harold took a slow step closer. You laughed at paying customers. You mocked their honesty. And for what? Because they paid in coins? Ryan's voice cracked. Sir, I didn't mean any disrespect. Oh, you meant it, Harold said quietly. You just didn't expect it to matter. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Harold turned to the hostess. Please make sure their payment is returned. Tonight's dinner's on the house. Evelyn tried to protest. That's not necessary, Harold. He smiled faintly. It is for me. Then he looked back at Ryan. Apologize. Ryan's throat tightened. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I'm truly sorry for what I said. It was wrong. Evelyn gave a small, kind smile. Apology accepted. But I hope you remember, son, not everyone you serve wears their worth on the outside. Ryan nodded quickly, his hands trembling. Yes, ma'am. Harold looked at him one last time, his voice steady. Respect doesn't come from a uniform. It comes from character. Try to find some. Then he gently took his wife's arm and led her toward the door. The entire restaurant watched in silence. No whispers, no clinking glasses, just quiet awe. As they stepped out into the cool evening, Evelyn smiled at her husband. You didn't have to say all that, you know. He chuckled softly. Maybe not. But sometimes people need to be reminded what real wealth looks like. Inside, Ryan stood frozen beside the counter. The envelope of coins still sat there, a small but heavy reminder of his own arrogance. The door of La Belle Table closed behind Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, leaving behind a silence thick enough to choke on. No one moved for several seconds. The guests looked around awkwardly, whispering in low tones. At the counter, Ryan stood motionless, his hands gripping the edge so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The envelope of coins sat beside the register, untouched. Finally, Elise, the hostess, broke the silence. You really didn't know, did you? Ryan shook his head slowly. No, I thought he was just some old guy trying to act fancy. Elise sighed. You didn't have to humiliate him to figure that out. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. What could he possibly say? Everything he'd done suddenly felt small, ugly, and childish. A voice came from the back. Paul, the restaurant manager. Ryan, office, now. The whispering from nearby tables followed him like a wave as he walked toward the small office behind the bar. Inside, Paul sat behind a wooden desk, his expression unreadable. Sit, he said quietly. Ryan obeyed. Paul leaned back, folding his arms. You've been a good worker. Fast, efficient, smart. But tonight you forgot the one thing this place is built on. Respect. Ryan kept his eyes on the floor. I know, I messed up. No, Paul replied. You didn't mess up an order. You messed up a person. The words landed heavy. I thought they were, Ryan started. Don't say it, Paul cut in. You thought they were beneath you. That's the part that should make you sick. Ryan nodded, guilt tightening in his chest. He fired me, didn't he? Paul sighed. No, he didn't say a word about firing you. But if it were up to me, you'd be cleaning dishes for a month straight. Ryan looked up, confused. He's not pressing it? Paul leaned forward. No, because that's the kind of man you disrespected. The kind who doesn't need revenge to teach a lesson. Ryan's throat ached. What do I do now? Show up tomorrow, Paul said. Work harder than you ever have. Treat every customer like they might own this place, or like they might be your parents. Either one works. He paused, then added quietly, and if Mr. Bennett comes back, you thank him for the chance to still wear that uniform. Ryan swallowed hard. Yes, sir. When he left the office, the dining room was almost empty. The lights were dimmer now, the mood softer. Elise was wiping down tables. She looked up when he passed. Ryan, she said. He wasn't testing you. They were just celebrating an anniversary. He stopped. I know. Her eyes softened. Then maybe next time, celebrate with them, instead of against them. He nodded silently and continued toward the back, where the sound of dishes and running water filled the air. He grabbed a rag and started cleaning without being told. For the first time that night, the pride in his chest was gone. What replaced it wasn't shame. It was something quieter, something heavier, a need to be better. And that, he thought, might be the only good thing he'd earned all evening. 3 days later, the golden glow of the afternoon sun spilled through the front windows of La Belle Table. The restaurant was calm, a quiet weekday between lunch and dinner. Ryan stood behind the counter, polishing silverware with focus. There was no laughter now, no arrogance. Just the sound of clinking dishes and the soft hum of a jazz tune playing overhead. He had come early that morning, an hour before his shift, to help clean. He'd greeted every guest personally, offered water before being asked, and even smiled for real. The staff had noticed, though no one said a word. At around 3 o'clock, the front door chimed. Ryan looked up. His breath caught. George and Evelyn Bennett stepped inside. This time they weren't dressed for a fancy dinner. George wore his same plaid shirt and jacket. Evelyn a soft blue cardigan. They looked warm, at ease, like people who belonged anywhere they chose to be. For a moment, Ryan froze. Then he set down the silverware and walked toward them slowly, heart pounding. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, he said, voice low and sincere. Welcome back. George smiled faintly. Didn't expect to see us again, did you? Ryan shook his head. Honestly, sir, I wasn't sure you'd ever want to. Evelyn looked at him kindly. We never said we wouldn't forgive you. We just hoped you'd learn something. Ryan nodded, eyes down. I did. More than I can explain. What I said, how I acted, it was cruel. I was trying to impress the wrong people. You didn't deserve that. George studied him for a moment, then motioned toward an empty booth. We'll take our usual table, if that's all right. Ryan blinked. Of course, sir. He guided them to their corner table, the same one as before. This time he placed the menus gently, filled their water glasses carefully, and smiled. Not as a server trying to earn a tip, but as a man trying to show respect. Throughout the meal, he checked in quietly but never hovered. When Evelyn dropped her napkin, he was there instantly to hand her a clean one. When George complimented the soup, Ryan thanked him like it was a gift. When they finished, George reached into his jacket, not for money, but for a small white envelope. He slid it toward Ryan. Ryan frowned. Sir, you don't have to. Relax, George said. It's not payment. It's a letter. Ryan opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note. To Ryan, respect isn't a uniform and kindness isn't a rule. They're choices. We all get a chance to choose better. You did today. Keep doing it. Harold and Evelyn Bennett. Ryan stared at the words for a long time, his throat tightening. When he looked up, they were already putting on their coats. He hurried after them, stopping near the door. Mr. Bennett, thank you for giving me another chance. George smiled. Everyone deserves one, son, as long as they use it. Then, with a gentle nod, they stepped back into the sunlight, hand in hand. Ryan stood there watching them go, the note still in his hand, realizing that in all his years of serving others, this was the first time he truly understood what service meant.